Hi, this is Gary Block, and welcome back to, well, you see it, your Little Falls Scene. A little bit of a history. We're doing rebroadcast of programs we did for a number of years. Back a number of years ago, about 2007, there were four guys here in Little Falls who got together at the local bakery and they discussed Little Falls. And the thought was, let's get these guys together. Gary Block will moderate it. And we sat down in the studio and we had some fun talking about Little Falls because these guys were a big part of the history of Little Falls. We had four gentlemen. We had Hub Zivoloski, Bodie Larson, and two brothers, Les and Russ Sod. And it was such a joy doing this program with them. We can't let this program just go away. It's a bit of history about Little Falls, and we had so many people who filled in over the years. We talked about Hennepin Paper. We talked about where I was at for many years, the local radio station. We talked about just baseball, anything that pertained to Little Falls, we talked about it. We had fun with it. And we're rebroadcasting some of those old programs. And thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy them here on Great River TV. Welcome to the Little Falls Scene. I'm Gary Block, and joining me are four gentlemen, and we're going to talk a little bit about Little Falls in the past. And gentlemen, maybe I can have you introduce yourselves to our audience.
I'm Les Sod. I live in Little Falls, and I'm retired. I volunteer at St. Gabriel's Hospital, 16 years.
And I'm Fred Larson, nicknamed Bodie. Born and raised in Little Falls, grade school, high school here, college in the Twin Cities, and worked for a paper company for 43 years, and I'm retired now.
Bill Bradlich, retired. I did a lot of different things because I never figured out what I should have done. Been in the Marine Corps, retired from the Guard, taught school, other different things, nicknamed Geppetto.
And he's got a garage with woodworking that most of us would kill for. Hub Zivoloski, retired nursing home administrator, retired from the city council, and just tired right now.
Well,
Merry Christmas.
we have a number of subjects we'd like to talk about, and one of them, gentlemen, is winter in Little Falls, and all of us have experienced winter in Little Falls in one way or another. And Hub, one of the subjects that kept coming up was the blizzard of 1940, Armistice Day, November 11th, 1940. Your remembrances of that?
I just remember that we were having a real nice weather, and everybody was caught off guard, and all of a sudden this Bodie said something like early afternoon or late morning it started yeah, and it just came down, caught everybody off guard. But my mother said we'll stay in the house. I was 10 years old at the time, but that was Armistice Day, so we had school the next day, and my mother chose me to go to see if there was school. We didn't have a radio station, and we didn't know, she just didn't know. And I often thought, was I the expendable one in our family? Because I had an older brother, an older sister, and a younger sister and a younger brother. And I can remember going over those big mounds, like Lindbergh Drive, that there must have been 6 feet of snow on that road. There was no way they could get through that. Of course, I went to school, and there was nobody there, so I went home and said, I guess we have the day off. But I remember that, and I often wondered, why did she send me?
And Bodie, you went duck hunting that day with your father.
I was out duck hunting that morning. It was on it was a Monday, as I recall, and my dad, being a county official, had the day off because it was Armistice Day, and the school was closed because I was 10 years old and I was at the Washington School. And we went out duck hunting, and it was a decent morning. I can't remember exactly, but we wouldn't have gone if it wasn't decent. And we were out in the middle of Skunk Lake, southeast of Little Falls. Had a rice blind around us, and Dad and myself in the boat. Had some decoys out, and the wind started to blow, and the snow started to come, and I can still visualize the landscape, the shoreline disappearing in the white. And my dad says, we better get out of here. So we left the decoys, we left the blinds, he pulled ashore in the boat, and we must have taken the boat with us. Don't quite recall, but anyway, we got out of there ahead of the worst part of the storm. We, as it developed, we came back, I'd say a couple of weeks later, chopped the decoys out of the ice, chopped the blind out of the ice, and retrieved them. An uncle of mine and a dentist in town at the time were out at the same time, and they didn't make it back. They had to hole up in one of the local farms out on the Rice Lake Flats. But that's my recollection of the Armistice Day blizzard.
Well, Bill, you and I were too young to remember that, but I'm sure you've heard stories about Armistice Day
Yeah,
blizzards.
my father was caught in Long Prairie. He went to see my mother there who was teaching school, and he was teaching school in Buffalo. So it started snowing, and it started looking a little bit bad, so he jumped into his 1936 Terraplane coupe with a rumble seat.
Airplane!
And he started heading out toward Little Falls. He got partway up that first hill, and that was it. And then farmer came by with a wagon and a team of horses, so he jumped on there and got back to town, and he was really lucky. He got to stay in the Reichert Hotel 2 or 3 nights, and for a fire escape, they had a rope ladder under the bed. Said, break the window and throw this thing out in case of fire.
So he had a 36 Terraplane. That's what my
Yep.
dad had. He
Really?
kept that till after World War II.
Hudson, Essex, and Terraplane, the
Yeah.
big three,
Yeah.
the triangle, the red triangle or whatever.
He
Les?
bought it brand new.
Your memories of the big blizzard of 1940?
Our house was where the Morrison County Jail is now. And we could see right downtown, like to the bakery and the store next door, the grocery store. Well, in the afternoon and the next morning, we couldn't see anything. But then they came with sleds and horses and started loading the snow up, all by hand.
They didn't have the equipment we have
No,
today.
they had shovels and they take it over on Fifth Street, the First Avenue between Fifth and Sixth Street, and then they had it on planks and they'd shovel off some, and then they'd turn the planks and the snow would fall down. And but those people that worked in those days, they didn't have the proper, well, they didn't have such a good clothing like we do now. So the only way they keep warm is keep working.
Well, did the city have enough employees to do this?
No, I think this was a WPA project. I mean, they had men that were doing other things, and then when it came to the storm. But for the city, I think it was John Sobiek, Art, what was his last name, do you remember?
I don't remember, Les.
Art. I think there was only, Max Dora. Yeah. But they didn't have much equipment. Yeah.
What were the roads like?
Well, I was just thinking the state must have had a V-plow, because I know we went down to St. Cloud, maybe it could have been a week after that, because it really took them a long time to clear that out. That was tons of snow. But I can remember Highway 10 was just a 2-lane, and there was just room to get 2 cars passing each other, and the mounds of snow were, God, they must have been 10 feet high. They just, like you burrowed through a mountain or something. And I can remember that as a 10-year-old. That was kind of scary. You know, you were sort of like driving in a tunnel all the way to St. Cloud. But yeah, they must have had V-plows. The state must have had.
Well, the
How
state
else?
probably
They
did,
sure
but-
didn't hand shovel that to St. Cloud.
But I think Adam Tucholsky had a big Caterpillar.
Oh yeah.
And also Stodoka.
Yes.
Oh,
the
yeah.
Dolphins,
Tri-City
Yeah.
Paving. He had some heavy equipment.
Hub, I remember you telling me a story about a guy who was picked up, well, for being inebriated. And he was put on work release, and it had something to do with snow also, didn't it?
Well, he would get loaded, he would end up in a snowbank, and the police would take him and put him in jail, and then they'd sentence him for a week or whatever it was, and he didn't take good care of his family, so he wasn't a very popular fellow, but he was only about 4'9", and then when they would get to snowbanks and clear the snowbanks off the main street, then they would hand shovel that into those big high trucks. I mean, this guy was taking those wide shovels, and he would have to throw it way the heck up there, and he did that all day long. And I would go, because my dad had a gas station, and I would go talk to him. I said, won't you ever learn? This is murderous work that he was doing, you know. But he never learned. The minute he got his paycheck, he was out drinking again, and he'd go through the same procedure. But that's the way they used the prisoners, was to clear the snow away.
Bill, you had a Norwegian uncle, if I remember correctly, had to warm up that Model T.
Oh, yeah. Old Martin Ole Andreessen. When his Model T wouldn't start, he'd open up the hood, kind of look around and see if any of the neighbor women were watching. Then he'd stand up on the fender and he'd urinate onto the intake manifold by the base of the carburetor, and then he'd quick jump in and start it up again. He used that trick a number of times.
And alcohol wasn't uncommon in the radiator. I know, Hub, you were talking about, about alcohol, but how about the radiator?
That was before Prestone. And when you drive those cars, and I don't remember what the thermostats were set at, if they were lucky to have a thermostat, but the alcohol, when the car got real hot, would evaporate, and so you'd end up with water. They would freeze it, and the only way to defrost them was to throw a blanket or something over them, just idle them till the engine got hot enough to melt the water in there, and then you'd be able to drain it out and put alcohol in. But that was a constant problem. And a problem in our gas station, we didn't have any indoor hoists. Everything was outdoors. So 20 below zero, you're out there just
Working on the cars.
yeah. Oh, it was terrible. Yeah.
That brings up a health issue related to this alcohol antifreeze.
Yeah.
Some of the people that were pretty desperate used to go and drain this stuff out of the road graders and county trucks, and they thought that if they'd filtered through a folded wool blanket, a potato, or a loaf of white bread, they would take out the poisons, and so they would drink it. And then they had three choices: either it would kill them, make them go blind, or destroy their nervous system.
We had a lot of blind people in those.
These weren't your relatives, Bill, we're talking about?
Yeah, they're all mine.
Well, to bring that up, Al's Tavern was south of Little Falls. I think Hub remembers
Yep,
that.
Al Thielen. He lived next door to
Al
me.
Thielen.
I babysat
Well,
his
this
kids.
friend of mine was down there, and he had a 32 Chevrolet. And unbeknown to him, these two fellas, Native Americans, they crawled underneath there, opened that petcock.
Oh,
No. Yeah. Well, then when he was going to go home, he drove about almost to Little Falls. Well, then wasn't watching the heat, and the engine froze up.
Ooh.
They got too hot. Yeah, I remember that when that happened. So they did drink that stuff.
One of the things I remember as a youngster was the car out on the ice. There was a contest, and people would buy chances as to when the car would go under. You guys all remember this?
Yes.
I do. I remember the last year that they had it, I bought a ticket, and it showed when it went down in the 10-year period. So I divided that out and came up with this date, and it went down that day, only I had the afternoon and went down in the morning, which was amazing that you could, take 10 figures and come up with the date that it went down.
Yeah,
But there was pollution involved. And
Oh, yeah. One of the things I remember is driving over the bridge. It was towards the end of the contest or sometime in the winter, and this car pretty much was a burned out shell. And I always thought maybe somebody torched this car because it would melt the ice, and somebody probably had, needed this thing to go down in the next few hours.
It was sponsored by one of the service clubs.
And I remember it was a struggle pulling that out of the water come
yeah.
springtime, fighting that strong spring current.
Yeah.
Ice skating,
Speaking
and we
of
have the ice rinks here in Little Falls, but it used to be on the river.
If you went to the, between the railroad tracks and the bridge, it was just north of the bridge. And it was on the west side, and it was just that shore area, and they had lights set up. I think they had some special lights set up on the bridge at the time. And that's where everybody skated. It was the only skating rink we had. Well, then we had that, and Lester should tell this story because he remembers it better than I do. The city crew was dumping snow on the river, and these two guys were putting it on the south side of the bridge, which was close to the dam.
Close to the dam.
So you tell the story because
So
you
what
remember it
happened?
better than I do.
Well, I can understand why they went between the bridge and the dam where the ice was thinner. instead of going on the north side, I suppose it was a place to drive down. And they got about halfway across and the truck went through. And I think it was Van Harkey.
Van
was he
Harkey.
the-
Yeah,
Yeah.
didn't he survive or did he die?
No,
Which-
he died,
He
but
died.
was
the
the one that
fella that
died.
was driving the truck, he lived across the street from my folks. And he got out.
Oh.
And then they had to grapple down and get a hook on it, and Adam Tucholsky had his big cat down there, and he pulled the thing out of the river. But talking about that skating rink thing, I remember they had a big stove in there, barrel stove. And after they had it there so long, somebody got the bright idea to chop a hole in the, to see how thick the ice was.
So the stove was on the ice, or
Yeah, the building.
there was a building on the
Yeah,
ice?
Yeah.
Portable.
Okay.
Well, then they realized how thin the heat in the building had melted that ice onto there. Everybody out, and that was the end of, that was the end of that thing being on the river.
Well, I think that it ended when they went down with the truck. They felt
Yeah,
that was.
yeah, that was
See, the
bad.
current is pretty heavy in there. You don't see it. It's underwater in the wintertime, and that's
Yeah.
always thin ice. Though
Yeah.
we used to walk across to go to high school, we'd go across that same dumb place.
Yeah,
Instead of going on the north side of the bridge, we'd do that.
geez.
And didn't Larson Boats used to plow a road out in the ice? You
Yeah.
remember that?
Oh, yeah,
On the
sure, they
Mississippi?
did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for the old skating, or the bathing beach there,
So
they
the
came
old
up.
bathing beach, yeah.
Yeah,
make it easier to go from one side to the
Shortcut.
other.
Short-
It was a
shortcut.
across the
Yeah.
ice.
Across the road.
Things that don't happen anymore.
no.
And how many of you guys remember cutting ice from the river?
Oh, yeah.
I remember
Oh, yes.
watching, but I mean, that
Yeah.
was up north of Duluth, but that was quite a project, you know, those big, well, the handle was at a right angle to the run of the blade, and so it just start cutting and cutting into big blocks and putting it up into the storage
Were
house.
they using a
with
round,
layers of
they were
sawdust.
using a round saw, was that?
No, it's a long cross cut, it's about 6 feet
Oh,
long.
okay, okay,
And then, you know, just one man
yeah.
sawing away. Used up a lot of sawdust.
Rest of you guys remember
Oh,
that?
I watched them all
Oh,
the
yeah.
time, yeah.
Where was it
Amazing.
done?
Right, let's see, where is that now? It's the drive-in for the U.S. Bank, is that, what, used to be the American National Bank.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
behind
across
yeah.
the street from that and a little bit to
Behind
the west.
Muskie's
Right.
old
Yeah.
building.
That's where the
Where the
ice
parking lot-
house was?
The ice house was there, and then
Yeah.
they would cut right out in front of it. And they would cut so much a day, and then by, it's 20 below zero, the next day they could cut in the same place if they wanted to. And then they would, they had a conveyor belt, and they would put it into this non-insulated building. I mean, it was just barely standing, wasn't it, Lester?
Yeah, I think it burned down after. a
Yeah,
while.
well, they probably did that on purpose.
But they
then
had
they would,
a,
they
I
would put
remember
sawdust.
a 6-cylinder Chevrolet engine, and then they had this blade that was about that big, like for sawing logs. And then they'd pull that along, and then that blade would cut that. That was a terrible job. I don't know, they probably didn't make much money, but it was hard work.
They seemed like they enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah.
The guys that
Oh, yeah,
was
that
Packy
was- Mm-hmm.
Farrier, and I don't know who else would help him, but then in the summertime, he'd
Yeah.
put that stuff in the truck, and he'd drive by your house, and you had this little sign outside. You wanted 5 pounds or 10 pounds or 20 or whatever it was. You put the sign in the window, he'd stop, he'd chisel it, you bring it into your house and put it in the ice-a-box,
In the
that's what it was
ice-box,
called.
right,
Yeah.
the ice
Well,
box.
did they ever run out of ice? I mean, this building could only hold so much ice, right?
It was like a big barn. So he had that thing from
Huge,
floor to
huge,
ceiling.
yeah.
Huge.
I don't think he ever ran out.
I don't
No.
think so.
Wasn't there a second one in town? I mean, you'd think that the town this size, you'd need two.
I don't think anybody wanted to go against Packy Farrier.
It was a monopoly.
Yeah, he was a monopoly. That was his middle name, Monopoly. No, he was a good guy. Packy was a good guy, but he should have played pro football.
Big guy.
Yeah, he was big.
So how
tough.
big were these chunks of ice? How far down would they go into the,
50 pound, oh,
Well, it
well,
depends how thick the ice was.
okay.
ice was usually 2 feet deep in there, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They said that some of those chunks got up to 500 pounds.
Yep.
And Packy put one of them on his back one time. Yeah, with the tongs. And he walked like that just to show him that he could carry that 500-pound piece of ice.
I remember, speaking of that, and it's off the subject, but I won't pursue it, when Cliff Buck's building burnt down, which is now They have the mural on, it's the first building by the railroad tracks. They have the mural of the old cars.
Yeah.
That was Cliff Buck's furniture store. And we heard the sirens coming, so we happened to be about a block away, so we went over there, and Cliff was trying to get stuff out of the building. And we helped, and he said, whoop. Well, he used different language, but there was a few, never mind. Yeah, no, he was very calm, at least I thought he was. And so we're hauling stuff out that we could haul out and taking it across the street. There was a Phillips 66 gas station there. Cliff comes out of the basement carrying a refrigerator. I mean, the refrigerators now you can carry with one hand, but those things were heavy. He was carrying it on his back, and he took it across the street. Well, after the place was gutted and they had a lot of servicemen's furniture stored on the second floor because this was during the war. And Cliff was really worried about that because I don't think he carried insurance on them. So I went over, and he was standing across the street from the fire, and he was totally out of it. And I said, Cliff, how did you ever carry that refrigerator out of the building? He said, I did. He did not remember.
Didn't remember it.
No. But you talk about, these guys were strong.
And some of the biggest fires we had in Little Falls were in the wintertime, weren't they?
Oh, yeah.
What are some of your memories of some of the fires we had in the downtown area, for example?
Well, the Coast to Coast in the A&P grocery store, that was where then they built a new Coast to Coast, your uncle
Yeah,
built
yeah.
that one there. That was one of the real bad ones. And then, of course, the Drawbridge fire. That was really a bad one, too, because it was so cold that night. And they had a roof furnace, and that was a contributing factor to it. I don't know what other big...
I remember that Coast to Coast fire because we were having I think it was a Christmas party at the VFW, which is now the record building. And so it had to be around Christmas time. It had to be that season, so it was winter. And when we heard there was a fire, everybody went out through the alley, and we were all standing around. There must have been 500-600 people around there. And it was Dick Ike and Steve LaFawn, and I think it was Fred LaFawn. They were walking away from the front of that building, and all 600 people saw this thing starting to come down. And I was standing next to, what was her name?
Mrs. Antone.
Antone, yeah. Winnie Antone. I was standing right by her. 600 people just watched that thing, including me. We were stunned. And she said, "Look out!" And those guys turned and looked, and they ran, and that building just came down. They were getting debris. They would have been nailed totally. So to her dying day, I called her the heroine. But that was a bad word, so we called her hero once in a while. But she never wanted to take credit for that. But I said, you were the only one that had the presence of mind to save 3 lives. And that picture was, that's been in the paper where that, just as that thing falls, just as it hits the ground, somebody got a good picture of that, and it's in the archives. Should get that one, Jerry.
The other fire I remember is, speaking of the Seabuck building, the building next to it, which is now a parking lot next to the West Side Bar, that was a winter fire also. It used to be a carpet store.
Well, before that it was, Charles Lindbergh's buddy.
Engstrom.
Martin Engstrom, yeah.
Engstrom,
He had a
hardware.
hardware, and his wife had a confectionery store. We never knew what that meant, but they sold ice cream and stuff like that in there. Yeah, that was, and he lived upstairs.
But the day after a winter fire is just an unbelievable sight, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, the icicles. and-
Everything's encased in ice.
Of course, there was the Boatworks fire, too, in
Oh,
December
yeah.
of, must have been
49.
49 or 50.
49.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us about that, Bodie.
Well, it caught in a feeding sawdust into augering sawdust into the furnace, and somehow or other the fire backed up. The night watchman tried to take some action on it. He called the fire department that came, and things were too late. In fact, the night watchman.
He died in that.
Jake Ringwelski. He died in that fire. but it burned the whole boatworks at that time, the whole thing right to the ground. Everything went.
It was Bob Ring's grandfather and Len Ring's dad.
Yeah.
And Len Ring owned the Red Bull Bar at that time, and Bob Kidder, those two.
Yeah, they had
That
a shooting range down the basement. Remember that, Bodie?
Yes, he had a shooting range down there. The Little Falls Rifle Pistol Club had a shooting range down there in that basement.
And
And
I
they-
remember- go ahead. Bo.
They were carrying, they had some sporting goods in there, and they had some ammunition. And as this, of course, as the fire heated up, some of this ammunition was, rifle ammunition was popping off. And I don't recall anybody getting hurt, but you could hear the noise as these sounded like firecrackers going off, the loaded ammunition.
And I remember somebody talking about, going back out on the ice, about the bridge up at Fort Ripley being taken out by the ice.
Ye-
Who has a story on that?
I thought Lester,
Well, they had the bridge in Little Falls, and then, I don't know, there must have been a big undertaking to move that up to Port Ripley.
They moved the bridge?
Yeah, move the bridge.
Piece by piece?
Disassembled, and they put it back together up there. And I remember us driving, my dad driving over there, because we went to the old Fort Ripley where the port was years ago. And wasn't in very good condition. And, but then one spring, the ice came and took the whole thing out. Then they put a ferry in there. So the guy slept in a tent on the west side of the river. And at night, if you wanted to go across, you blew your car horn, and then he'd bring the ferry across. And I don't know what they charged you at that time, probably 50 cents. I don't
50
know.
cents, I think it was,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that was the only way to get over the river?
Yeah.
In that area.
In that area.
Between Little Falls and Brainerd.
Yeah, yeah.
So how many cars could you put in this ferry? Do you remember?
I think just one.
That was
Well, it was
pretty
I rode that
primitive.
ferry a few times.
Yeah.
I rode it during deer season, and
No,
because
I
we
never
were
rode
hunting
on
wood, just north of camp. Now it would be Camp Ripley, but at the time it was just north of camp. And it seems to me, Les, that there could be up to maybe 4 cars on
There
there
could.
at one time. But we rode it back and forth during that deer season because of where we were hunting. And then eventually they abandoned the ferry, and there's nothing there. Because that became Camp Ripley, and there was no reason,
Sure.
there were no folks there to cross anymore, no need to cross.
I think the foundation for the bridge on the east side is still there.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one Sunday afternoon, Bill Butcher, who was a county sheriff, and his wife, they got on that ferry, and the cable broke.
No.
And then the ferry went down the river until it hit a sandbar. Well, luckily their car didn't go off into the river, but that was a big deal to get that thing back up and hook it so they could get the car off.
What a ride.
It would be
Yeah.
kind of scary.
What a ride. Because the next stop might have been the dam, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Down the river.
Whoa!
Well, when we think about winter in Little Falls, I can't help but think about Winter Wonderland. This, I think, sparks a lot of memories for a lot of people who have spent time in Little Falls. When was this? What was Winter Wonderland? Background on it.
Had to be around 1949, 48, someplace in there. Father Ramaker from St. Mary's, or it was St. Aloysius at that time, started that. And Mimi Jarash, wasn't that Jarash
Yeah.
property?
Gosh, yeah.
Yeah, he found this nice hills, and it was this set way back, let's see, that would be southeast of Little Falls.
Correct.
Anybody knows where the coach, the girls' basketball coach,
Cool.
Cool, yeah,
Jerry Cool.
Jerry Cool lives, it would have been straight east of that and then off to the right. Well, it was just a little dirt country road there, and thousands of people would attend that thing. They had a ice skating rink, and they had a warming shack, and then they had the toboggan and ski slide through there. And then they would have celebrations like not an amateur show, but a variety show. And Cleland Card was there, and Cedric Adams would run his newscast from there, and it was really a big deal. I mean, everybody just got into that, and I don't know, did that last for 4 years, 4 years?
Probably about 3 years
I'd say about 3 years.
until
yeah.
that girl got killed out there.
Girl got killed out there.
And
that
nobody
just-
thought of ever having any insurance. Why would you want insurance?
Sure.
Yeah.
Was that related to a toboggan accident, or?
I don't remember, was it
Yeah,
a
it was a
toboggan? It
toboggan.
fell on her or
Yeah,
something?
Yeah, she
Yeah,
rolled over.
It was a pretty
and-
tough run there.
Yeah.
So tell me something about Father Ramacher. Why would he want to do this?
He was
This is
just-
a great idea.
He was just, he was in the wrong business. This guy could call up, this guy could call Bing Crosby and get a donation from him. I mean, he just had connections unreal. He was just in the wrong business. He just wanted to do things like that. And he put every minute of his life into that sort of thing. I remember they had a variety show, and they had some girls from St. Francis were dancing and singing, and Ramacher came to my little group, Archie, Ollie, and Gail, and he said, we're going to do this skeleton number, and he said, we're going to turn the lights out, and would you guys put on long underwear with what do you call that, bright, the
Fluorescent?
fluorescent skeleton on you and run through the audience in that situation. We said, we're going to run through the audience in long underwear with the lights out. We'll make a deal with you. If you can get us dates with the girls from Franny's. He did. Took us over there and introduced us to the nun, and we dated the girls. But you couldn't say no to him. And somebody asked, well, did you pay for that? That paying for anything from when he asked you to do something, forget it. It was all donation. It wasn't even a consideration.
Les, you built the fireplace in the building?
Yeah.
Free?
They built that
Free?
log
You
building.
volunteered your time?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
It was in the winter time and
So did you get a call from Father Ramacher, or
oh, absolutely.
he said
Yeah.
you will do this, or did he ask you?
No,
to do it?
he
No,
said,
he was
"Would you
always just a
come
neat
out?"
guy,
yeah.
Yeah, but it was fieldstone that you built it out of. It wasn't bricks. So it was kind of rather a hard job to do that because it was darn cold in there and things were freezing up, and I don't know where they got the water out of that pond, I think.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
And he had
Yeah.
dyed it blue, so when you saw it from, when you came in, you were kind of above. It was kind of a nice little valley in there. You come in there and the building was very nice, and there was that blue ice, and it was really
So
neat.
how do you dye a pond blue? I mean, was it frozen
Only Father
already?
Ramacher could do that. Probably called up Bing Crosby and said, Bing, how would we do that?
Probably painted it.
No, if you dumped off enough copper sulfate crystals in there to turn it a real pretty blue,
Do you think that's what happened?
could be. I mean, did it kill all the fish and everything else in there?
Yeah,
That was immaterial.
yeah.
It was blue. That's
was
all
blue.
that counted.
Here's a little of Mrs. Stewart's bluing in there, maybe.
The one problem was, like I said, it was just a dirt road, and people would be parked, gosh, a mile away. I mean, there were so many cars, there wasn't an accommodation for. I'm having trouble with
We're gonna have to weld that onto.
Yeah, I
Get
think
that C-clamp, Bill.
Why don't you hang it onto the bow of your glasses?
You were talking about the
There.
road and the people?
Yeah, it just, there was no accommodation for parking there, so it was rather cumbersome to get there, and it was a lot of snow, of course, but didn't deter the people. Man, they would come there by the tons. I was in the amateur show. That was the
Tell us
first time.
about that.
Well,
Yes, you sang.
well, growing up, my dad, we entertained at every country school within 20 miles of here. And I always sang with my brother. We sang country western. In fact, we're on the jump circle at the high school for a regional tournament game, and we're doing our little country western thing. And I turned to Bud after we got it. This is ridiculous. We're singing country western at a basketball game. Anyway, I had that experience with the family, but I never had, I'd never had soloed. And so this contest came along, and my sister Mary said, why don't you enter that contest? And I said, okay. She said, what? I said, yeah, okay, we'll do a couple numbers, and that's what we did. And then if you won there, then you got to be in the big variety show, and that's when, who did I say it was? Not Cedric Adams, the other one.
Tony Bennett?
Tony Bennett.
Clellan,
You're a lot of help.
Clellan Card?
Clellan Card was the MC on that one, yeah.
Excellent, yeah.
And he told me when it was over with, he said, if you ever want a singing job, he said, come down to Minneapolis. Well, I went in service, and And he went into a different area and it never developed, but he thought I was good.
So where did you place?
Second place,
Who beat you?
a little girl from St. Cloud, was about 12 years old. She forgot her music and she played it by ear. And it was hard on the ears, but they appreciated her showmanship, and so she got. My brother said, "I don't know how I lost." He said, "I stuffed that ballad." Oh yeah, we weren't above anything in those days.
Miss America was there?
Miss Beebe Shop.
Beebe Shop, yeah.
Miss America.
So Father
19
Ramacher probably called her up?
I suspect that
Yeah.
that was
Oh,
true,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was known statewide. Now,
Yeah.
they had a cartoonist, did caricatures for the Minneapolis paper, and he came up during that time period, and he did caricatures of my dad and your dad and everybody. I've got copies of that someplace at home. I have to look it up. But he did these little, put them in all over the newspaper, so everybody in the state knew about this
Yeah.
Winter Wonderland.
It was well promoted,
It was
right?
well promoted. It was
So Miss
well-
America just showed up and was just there?
Oh,
Did
yeah.
she do anything?
just-
Do you remember?
She played the xylophone. So she played a couple numbers on the
Yeah.
xylophone.
Maybe he was her godfather.
I'm not going there.
But you know, Father Ramacher, another one was hobby, was photography.
Okay.
So when they tore the church down, Landwehr was up there and they had a hold of that and they were gonna topple the steeple down. And it was about this far, and I clicked a couple pictures, and Ramacher had his camera set up and everything. So he got some nice pictures that he took, and he went over to the school, and when he took the film out to develop it, I'm not going to say the guy's name, but he opened the door and said, "What are you guys doing?" And that was the end of the
So he burnt the
all
building
the
down
light
and
came in. I remember that. That was terrible.
Was there a fee? Did you pay anything? How did they maintain something like this?
you mean the
At
Winter Wonderland? I would imagine that there was a lot of contribution from the merchants. They were all kind of together, and
Yeah.
Right.
and there wasn't a membership, and there was no charge out there. I mean, if you bought something to eat or something, but no, it was pretty much freebie, and
Right.
we never seemed to have a financial problem. It was just that girl
Yeah.
got killed, and that kind of ended it.
Okay.
Then Ramacher was transferred to another church, and
Yeah.
that was the end of that.
And Massey Motors, they were the one that donated the lift. They had an engine up there, and then you'd sit on this thing, and they take you to the top of the hill and
Yeah,
go
Regular
back down.
ski lift?
yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Oh, this was big time.
Could you do that with toboggans too? Could you take the lift up?
Oh,
or-
sure. Yeah,
yeah.
whatever you could
Yeah.
carry.
This was something.
Yeah.
It was really, you had to live in that era, and baseball was the same thing. There was never a problem. It was the business people, most of them had cottages on Lake Alec, and they'd say on a Sunday night when we were playing a Sunday night ball game, it was just like a convoy coming to town. And whenever there was money needed or they needed advertising on the fencing, there was never any problem. Everybody was cooperating. It was just like one happy group. in
Wasn't
those days.
Seabuck the manager for a while?
Well, he had the west side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the west side.
Yeah, he started
team.
us out.
Yeah.
Now, didn't I hear that the building was moved?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
They moved it up north of town there where, I don't know how.
There was
to
a small
explain
ski jump up there, just south of Hole in the Days Bluff, wasn't there?
Yeah.
The small ski
Yeah.
jump there? And they moved that building into that area where it lasted for a
it. Yeah.
brief period of time and then
They
disintegrated
keep
somehow.
taking it off, and they told me I could have the heatilator in there. It was a great big huge one, and that went down to Cedar Lake. Dave Larson asked me if he could have it,
Oh.
Bodie's uncle.
Okay.
And that went down to that Bible camp down there on Cedar Lake by Upsall.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
So
okay.
the fireplace you built, did that survive the move?
No, 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 they were intending to redo it again, but it just went all to heck. Yeah, too bad.
Well, besides Winter Wonderland, we had the infamous Hawthorne Hill in Little Falls. And I know
Oh,
there's
yeah.
a couple of guys here that have stories about it. Where was Hawthorne Hill?
About 8th Street and 9th Avenue, somewhere in
Seventh-
there on
seventh.
northeast.
7th Avenue
Seventh Avenue.
and 9th and 7th.
Why was it called Hawthorne Hill?
because that was the name of the school.
The name
Okay.
of the school.
The school
yeah.
was
Okay.
there, the
And I don't know if
public
the
school.
Hawthorne Hill was there before the Hawthorne School. I have no idea.
I don't know.
I didn't have privileges on that end of
Yeah.
town unless I wanted to die.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
We had
that
to
was
get-
the hill to slide on if you had a good sled. You could slide from 9th Street all the way down to 7th and then across the railroad track. If you were lucky, you made it across the railroad track.
On your
That's
sled?
railroad on
Yeah.
5th Street, or
Yeah.
between
Yeah.
5th and 6th.
Now,
Yeah.
were there cars going?
Well, you'd
North
have
and
to have
south of the
somebody watching, but then years later, the police got the city to sand it, so you couldn't slide
Yeah,
on it. It was
yeah.
too dangerous.
and there wasn't the traffic that we have
No.
today either,
No.
so.
No.
So it wouldn't have
But
been
it was-
uncommon to be going down 8th or 9th Street in the northeast part of town and seeing some kids and their sleds go by.
by.
Bill, you
Oh,
seem
very
absolutely
common.
perplexed by this thought.
No, I was just thinking about, well, I mean, having grown up north of Duluth, if a lot of people back then used to put their cars up on blocks for the winter, and
Yeah.
just walk, because
Sure.
it's such a nuisance.
Too dangerous, huh?
Yeah, did they do that down here too much?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Your dad
Well,
was
oh,
pretty
yeah,
frugal.
it's-
He used to put his car up on blocks and
No,
all
he was
that?
too lazy. He wouldn't, he was
Oh.
frugal, but he was, if his son didn't do it, then it didn't happen. No, he had to have his transportation,
Oh, okay.
that Terraplane, 36 Terraplane.
Oh, yes.
I remember once, I would work the morning shift, he would work the afternoon, I'd work the evening shift. This is when I was in school. And it was one of these December days, talking about winter, sheer ice. It had rained and it was just sheer ice. And I could see him, our station was where the savings and loan is now, right across the street from the post office. But I could see him all probably back to Saldine's corner over there, coming at me, and it was time for him to relieve me. God, he's coming like a bat out of hell, and I said, no, he must be going someplace. Oh no, he's going to make that corner, because he had to go around like this. And there was a light pole right there. That was those green ones, you
Yeah.
know.
Oh, the cast
I mean, you
iron,
looked
or-
at the cast iron and they'd fall apart, and he comes at the corner, and there was a little curbing, and he hit that curbing, and the light was right there, and he bounced off of that, and he pulled in. I said, boy, that was close, Dad. He said, what was close? He was a mad driver. Oh, my God. He must have made that corner at 40 miles an hour. He bounced off that curb. Didn't bother him at all.
Yeah, I remember as a youngster in wintertime, the first house my parents had owned, they burned coal. And it wasn't uncommon for my father. We lived on 5th Street Southeast, and of course the railroad track was between 5th and 6th, and all the big warehouses with the coal were over there. And obviously a lot of the coal never made it into the warehouse from the train car to the, and I remember my dad going over there with the pail that he'd use for the ashes, and he'd go over there, shovel coal, and bring it back home. But I remember you'd have the coal room downstairs, and you'd have to put it into the automatic stoker, and the forms of heat that you had in wintertime in your homes.
Well, and carrying out the clinkers and ashes, which was
Yeah.
good to throw onto the ice.
Yeah.
Sure, sure.
Or the garden.
Yeah.
We had coal.
You had coal also?
Yeah, had coal until my dad died in, when did he die? About 69. And the coal bin was, geez, around the corner, and towards that time frame, there was only one person that you could buy coal from, who was somebody in Piers. And then when you had a lot of snow, you had to come in the back end of the house, and got snow that deep, and we could never store enough to last the winter, so you'd always have to have a second fill. Well, when my dad died, my mother's dragging those big chunks from there way over to the furnace, and I said, Ma, she said, well, I suppose you're going to move him from the house now. And I said, no, Ma, but we're going to get rid of that coal furnace. So we took the coal furnace and put gas in. But yeah, that was, what was nice about it was in the wintertime, we played down the basement a lot. We played hockey down there and all kinds of things. And we had the potato bin, in the little vegetable room, and we'd take the potatoes and open that grate and put them on the sides in that coal furnace, and they would just get charcoal on the outside. And my mother would hear that, are you guys putting potatoes in there? No, Mom. And then you kind of break out that outside. Oh, they were absolutely delicious.
It's interesting that you could only get coal from a dealer in Piers.
Yeah, in the late days.
Okay.
We're talking 60s.
Oh, because not as many
Most
people were
everybody- yeah.
burning coal anymore.
No,
Okay.
there wasn't enough call for it. Prior to that, there was a coal bin right there by Cliff Buck's, wasn't there? I don't remember who
Well,
was.
Albert Enke had
Yeah,
one.
Inky,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Ryan had the coal
Ryan,
company, and
yeah.
the lumberyard
Yeah,
had
there
coal.
was competition
And
earlier,
Bard's
but.
Hardware, they had coal.
Now,
Yeah.
did they deliver it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you bought it by the truckload and dumped it through the basement window, or?
We had a coal bin. It was probably 8 by 8 from floor to ceiling. Yeah, it was a messy thing when they dump it in there, and of course, all that
All
coal
that
dust
dust,
was
yeah.
all over.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really a messy thing.
You remember coal dust in the house from burning
Oh,
coal?
yeah.
It was, huh?
Yeah.
Wasn't
Oh,
real
like if
clean
the
burning.
fire'd go out, then you get that sulfur smell, and that, you get that taste in your mouth.
My dad would always get a couple cords of wood, and we'd throw those through the window in the other part of the basement closer to the stove, so that when it did go out, you could start the fire. But yeah, it was a nuisance. You know, it was like being tied down as a farmer milking cows. Somebody had to be there to keep that thing going.
But at the hospital, they burned a carload of coal a week. And Mr. Walvogel was the tender there. And he lived only about 100 feet away. And he was there to keep that fire going, and he shoveled it all in by hand until the kids got a little older. You know,
Sylvester was our
He
classmate.
got,
yeah.
and then he'd go over there and help his dad. But you imagine year after year shoveling all that coal in that boiler by hand?
Oh,
All by
Paper mill
himself.
was the same thing. Mr. Zorn would hand shovel for the steam that they needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mr. At the courthouse, what was his name, Bodie?
Thomas?
Thomas.
Thomas,
Mr.
yes.
Thomas, he had shoveled it all in by hand. Yeah.
so Les and Bodie, did you burn coal also? Do you
Yeah.
remember?
Yeah.
Wood and coal.
Wood and coal?
And when my folks built the house, which I still live in incidentally, built the house in 33, they burned coal, and then not in a short period of time after that, probably 2, 3, 4 years later, my dad switched to oil. But the coal bin is still there. We refer to it as my sister and I refer to it as the coal bin.
Yeah.
It's got it's a storage room now and an oil tank in there. But yeah, definitely, my folks had coal.
But I can remember over on the track over, from your folks
Yep.
over, we'd run over and we'd make faces, and then the firemen would throw coal at us. That's the only thing he had to throw at us, so he'd throw coal at us. And we'd take it home and put it in the snowman for a
Eyes
face.
and nose
Yeah.
and mouth, sure. Yeah, that's right. The holidays, everybody was raised different, I'm sure, as we sit at this table, and we had different traditions during the holidays. And I'm thinking more of, the Christmas holidays. Hub, holidays at your family when you were young, was there anything special or things that you remember that maybe you shouldn't have
It
done?
was very much the same every year. Christmas Eve, my dad was on the city council at that time, and in those days, it was okay for them to accept gifts, and all the bars, because the bars wanted their license renewed, would always try to outdo each other. There'd be a case of beer or a real special vodka or whatever. And my dad would call, did anything come in? This is Christmas Eve, because they would always deliver, Oh, we got a case of beer. Oh, that cheapskate, I should have got 2 from him, It was just kind of his excitement. He'd get stocked up on the booze. But then we would eat an early supper, and then we would open gifts, not the Santa Claus stuff. My dad kept that up long after it was unnecessary. I mean, I was around 14, and I figured out what Santa Claus was all about. Anyway, and then we would go to midnight mass. Oh no! And then we would open gifts, and then we'd go to midnight mass, and then we'd come home and we'd eat, and then go to bed. But my dad, when we were younger, all 5 of us kids slept in one room because the upstairs wasn't finished yet, and so the 2 girls were in one bed, the 3 boys in the other, and my dad would put up the Christmas tree after we went to bed. We didn't see the Christmas tree till Christmas morning. And then Bud and I would wait till he was all done, and then we'd sneak into the living room. He'd turn on the light. He said, turn the light on for 10 seconds, and you'll see what gifts are. And they'd turn on, we'd go back to bed. We'd do this about 3 or 4 times, and my dad would say, I think you guys have looked at that stuff enough. Go to sleep. Morning's coming. Anyway, this one particular year, and we were all fairly older, my mother comes into the bedroom, my older sister Mary. My mother's laughing so hard she just can't. She said, Mary, you got to help me. And so Mary gets out of the bed, and they go into the kitchen. Now, we had a back porch. You went straight in, and then there was this entryway that wasn't much bigger than this table. There was the basement door, the door into the kitchen, and the door outside. My dad was bringing the Christmas tree in, but he brought it in the wrong way, you know, against the grain. He got pinned in the corner. He couldn't go one way or the other. And Mary said my mother and I were they just laughed at him. They couldn't help him. They were laughing so hard. I guess he finally backed it out of there, but he was not too happy with that whole idea. But I could just visualize Oliver Hardy.
I was just imagining if you knew that this would look like.
Yeah. But I could just see old Mr. Know-It-all putting that tree in the wrong way. He should have come in the front door in the first place, but no, he had, and he must have hid that tree outside the place until Christmas, probably in the garage. You know. But then we wake up in the morning, and there was the Christmas tree.
Well, you didn't have artificial Christmas trees. Were there a number of
No.
people in Little Falls selling Christmas trees?
A lot of
Yeah.
people went out and cut them themselves.
They did.
Yeah. Right off somebody's front lawn. No, it wasn't. No.
Yeah, Marvin Hollerman, he was the one that sold most of the
Yeah.
trees down
Yeah.
on Cherry Avenue.
Yeah, and my Uncle Dave sold trees
Yeah,
too.
your Uncle
Yeah,
Dave.
most of the gas stations had them, didn't they? No.
Gas stations had them. There were several spots where you could, a handful of spots anyway, where you could buy them, and then others cut their own. A lot of times, my dad would buy one, but on a couple of occasions we went out and cut our own. In fact, the last time we cut our own was in the December of 1947. Doing that on some relatives' land up near Cushing, cutting a nice spruce tree and teepeeing the tree up in a couple of other spruces, and we had a heck of a time trying to get it down. Finally did.
Bill, memories, you were raised where?
North of Duluth, up on the Iron Range.
Okay.
And you're talking about fires before. Well, when you're talking about natural Christmas trees, when I was really little, they used to have candles. And every once in a while, you know, a candle would tip over or whatnot and start the tree on fire in the living room and, you know, a good portion of the house. But we used to string out the celebration over an extended period of time because my grandfather, who had a bakery, had a lot of Greek and Serbian friends. So we'd celebrate the normal Christmas and New Year's, and then the Orthodox Christmas and New Year's, which was on the, let's see, we're on the Gregorian calendar, and they're on the Julian, so there's like a time lag of 2 weeks, so we'd celebrate for about a month.
So in other words, you didn't have anything else to do up there in the wintertime.
Oh yeah, we would spend a lot of time skating, because we had, up in Evelyn, of course, we had 2 indoor rinks and probably 7 outdoor rinks, and between, you know, skiing and skating and snowshoeing, we'd even play softball on snowshoes, which is really hard running to first base.
I
on
would think so,
snowshoes.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of flips and is
No
interesting.
track records there, huh?
No. Running for a fly? Oh, gee.
So, at your home at Christmas time with your parents, were there?
No, I didn't used to be at home. Good thing you brought that up. My dad was probably more frugal than your father. Anyway, he used to always put his car up in blocks in winter. And we'd walk down to the train depot, and we'd go down to Duluth on the train with our skis and everything, and then we'd spend the holidays down in Duluth. So that was something different.
Bodie?
But pretty much of a traditional Christmas, as I recall. We had, there were natural trees, spruce or balsam, setting them up in the living room. Remember, the kids would always, I had 2 older sisters and myself, we did help do the decorating. Santa Claus came Christmas Eve when we were in bed, and we'd be up early the next morning looking to see what Santa Claus had brought on Christmas morning. But it was pretty much a traditional deal with lights. I know that in our collection of stuff we have candles too, Bill, but they weren't used when I was young, but they might have been used for my older sister.
Mm-hmm.
So
We'd put them on the trees, but we would never light them.
Oh,
yeah.
Went on
smarter
early.
than people I knew that used to like those things.
My dad was really,
We won't go into
fires
that,
really,
though.
yeah.
my dad really had the fear of that, so we never lit them, but we'd put them there just for decorations.
Les?
One thing I remember, I just thought of it. Years ago, at Christmas time, I think it was 1946, and Nick Treader's son and his wife, Faye,
Faye,
he was
okay.
in the Navy. And he said, Mom, don't take the Christmas tree down until I get home. And it was, you know, like Christmas time. So he thought he'd be discharged, you know. Well, it came to the 1st of July, the tree was still up, but there was no needles on it. Everything was down below about that thick. Needles, all it was a tree stand there, and then Faye came home and there was the tree was still up.
Which also reminds me of the story, and I'll let you go back before I forget this. When Pat Spence used to be our mayor, I remember Pat telling me they lived above the treasure chest, right? That was their business. And they had left their Christmas tree up till March because they were so busy, and her and Guy were involved in so many things. And I remember her telling me the story. They were so embarrassed because they didn't want to put what was left of that Christmas tree out in the alley, that they cut it up in small pieces, put it in a bag so the garbage man wouldn't notice they just took their Christmas tree down. So they weren't, it's happened over the years. So what happened at your home at Christmas time, Les?
Well, I got a Red Ryder BB gun.
Oh, no.
And,
Did a
and
movie about that. didn't
Bobby
it?
Schroeder, Bobby Schroeder was a friend of mine, and Donnie, they lived out north of Perkins there, and his folks let us go out there, and we'd go up in the haymow and shoot pigeons. And then we'd have to save up money to buy BBs, and we'd always get the one down in Jitka, because Bodie said they were copper coated.
Copper coated, yeah.
Yeah. So, boy, that was a highlight to have a BB gun, I'll tell you. That was, but never dared shoot it in the neighborhood or any place. Yeah.
Was it pump or lever action?
It was a lever.
Red Ryder.
I had a pump Red Ryder.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I've got a pump, but I still got it too.
Really?
Yeah, I still got it, the
You
original
shot any
pump.
pigeons lately, or?
No, but
Squirrels
it's
from the west side?
Cornish hens, how about Cornish hens?
nothing out of season though.
But the movie about the BB gun, anybody remember the name of that movie?
Christmas Story,
Story,
correct.
okay.
Christmas Story.
The father in there was my dad. I mean,
It was, huh?
yeah, down the basement with that furnace, and he buys that crazy leg of a woman.
Yep,
That was my dad.
Oh,
And I laughed at that because it reminded me so much of him.
What time of the year did the furnace blow up in the garage when it came up all covered
Oh,
with soot?
God, I don't remember what time.
Oh.
That had to be winter.
Yeah.
You know, we all have memories, and that's really what this program really has become about, is memories and our memories of what we lived through, what happened here in the community and around the area. And it's something that we'll get back together again, and we'll talk about more memories, right? And have a few laughs and a few smiles. So
What about your memories? You haven't said anything about your Christmas.
on Christmas,
Yeah.
I remember opening up a gift. You know, we had Santa Claus, we had Christmas Eve. We always had the same thing. We always had ham and peas. I have no idea why. Mashed potatoes at Christmas Eve. And I'm disappointed if I went over to my mother's as an adult and she didn't have that. And we would open gifts, and they probably would go to church, and Santa Claus would come overnight, and we'd open up the gifts. But I remember one year finding where Santa Claus left the gifts. And one of them was a hockey game, you know, where you had the
Sure.
sticks or whatever, and it moved the players back and forth. And I remember the neighbor and I went upstairs. My parents were gone. Every Friday they went to Piers because they had Strike It Rich in Piers, and at 9 o'clock they read somebody's name and you could have won money. So they were gone that Friday night. So we took the wrapping off very carefully, pulled the box out, pulled the game, we set it all up, put all the hockey players on, and we played hockey. Had a great time. And this was, you know, a week or two before Christmas, and every time my parents left, you'd call them up and say, hey, they're gone again, let's play hockey. Well, by the time Christmas came, you had to be surprised because you got that hockey game. Well, the poor thing was almost worn out already. So that was one of the memories that I had at
One of
Christmas
the
also.
lines that stayed with my family forever was my brother Tommy was about 4 years old, and we were opening these gifts in the evening, and they handed him his gift, and he said, oh, he said, it feels like a little red truck. And you knew darn well he had peeked in there. It's like a little red truck.
Well, guys, we got to go today,
Yep.
but we're going to get back together again, and we're going to share more memories in the future. So, Hub and Bill and Bodie and Les, thank you very much for being with us, and we'll do this again.
Thank you. And
Thank you for
Channel
inviting
6,
us.
the boys over
you.
there.
It's fun.
This is
Thank
fun.
you.
Yep, be ready for the Little Falls scene in the future once again, and I'm Gary Block, and thanks for joining us.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Happy New Year.